Hello, I am your host Isobel Jones with another episode of your weekly WINOL podcast. Today I am joined by
Mariella
and Connor,
and we have some hefty stories to discuss this week, from the big 4.6% rise in train fares across England and Wales, discovering Hampshire's hidden heroine who led the pathway to the right of fresh water, and a WINOL exclusive on one of the Dragon Den's most recent successes. So I think we're going to start with you, Connor. Can you tell us a bit about this train fare increase?
Yeah, so on the 2nd of March, the government's plan to increase rail fares came into play. So this was from the autumn budget, which happened last year, but it was scheduled for the 2nd of March. So up across, up and down England and Wales, train fares will be they'll become more expensive over time. So, for example, if you were to go from Southampton to London, it'll cost you just under £7,500, and also rail cards. I suppose you both have rail cards as well.
Yeah.
So they'll now cost £35 a year compared to the usual £30, what it's been for just over a decade.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that is quite a change.
In over a decade. So when was the last time rail cards had a price change?
So it was 2013,
And is this all across the country?
So it's mainly England and Wales, but I'm pretty sure in Norfolk and sort of up north it's not as hefty. I think it's only about 3.5. I think so. It's mainly, I think it's Thameslink, South Western, Southern, and those are the ones that have been impacted the most. So for most of them, they'll cost just more. Case of, so it says here, I found out that Campaign for Better Transport found out that out of the 40 most popular commuter routes into London, 3 now cost more than £6,000. So, for example, if you're from Canterbury to London, it'll cost you just over £7,000.
Oh,
So
wow.
commuters are definitely going to feel the change.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, I never knew it was that much as well for a season railway ticket.
No.
It's insane.
I mean, I think I use trains fairly often, but I guess in comparison to people that are using them every day to commute to work, probably it doesn't seem like I do use them that much.
Probably doesn't add up as enough. I suppose if you're going back and forth every day for like your 9 to 5,
Yeah.
you're probably spending at least £50 a day on average or something
And
like that.
I mean, it must still be worth it. If they can afford to increase it that much, it must still make a difference as opposed to actually living in London. Like that
Wow.
sort of
It
goes
says a
to
lot,
show, doesn't it?
And a lot of people do work in London as well. I think it's probably one of the most commuted to places across the whole UK. There's so much work there. It's insane. £7,500 to almost £7,500 to get to London every day is just mental.
I suppose that if, like you said, if they can afford it, it must be worth it still then. But people aren't very happy because of the sort of the lack of reliability and the delays that people get on trains at quite a sort of frequent rate, especially over like the festive period and holidays. So people are unsure of why it's gonna keep going up every year.
What about train strikes and stuff? Are they still going to happen with the increase in price, or?
Yeah, so train strikes will still occur as sort of when they sort of do. So the last disruption they had was in February across Elizabeth Line services and Avanti West Coasts, but they were actually cancelled due to, I think, an increase in pay rise, but then also they just went back to operating on their normal timetables as typical. But across certain networks they could last up to maybe May, but I think most of them are getting called off at the moment just for sort of trying to bring back a bit sort of people wanting to get on trains again, trying to show that's a bit more affordable.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Thank you for letting us know, Connor. And to anyone listening, plan your journeys ahead of time and make sure you can afford your train ticket. I think, actually, Mariella, I really want to learn more about this hidden heroine who led the pathway to tap water and fresh water. Can you tell us a bit?
So have any of you heard of Juliana Delaflood or Juliana of the Water?
No.
So she is actually a Winchester lady. She worked as a washerwoman on Upper Brook Street in Winchester, and she was very influential. So she was from the 13th century, and she had her water supply cut off by the mayor of Winchester at the time, and she campaigned to the king, and what she campaigned for was codified into the National Convention of Human Rights, and the right to access water was started with her and her campaigning. And I think most people would never have even heard of her.
No, that is mental. And she was from Winchester.
From Winchester, yeah.
That's insane. Oh,
so
wow.
I found out about her as it's Women's History Month, March. I went down to the museum and spoke to a lady there about women in Winchester, historical women who they're celebrating this month with daily social media posts. And yes, she told me all about Juliana de la Flood, and I had no clue.
It's quite funny that her last name's Flood, and she...
It's quite ironic.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's probably a name that's been coined for her, Juliana of the Water.
Bit of a nickname.
Yes, but unfortunately there's no sort of artefacts of her at the museum. The closest thing they had was the toilet seat belonging to the mayor who denied her water. But that just goes to show, she didn't have this big status. I think often we celebrate the more known women, the queens, but she was just a local washerwoman, and she really still impacts our lives today.
Oh, wow.
So Mary, what would you say the importance of Women's History Month as a whole is, sort of even in Winchester and sort of afar as well?
So, speaking to the lady at the museum, I asked her that very question, and she thought it was really important to sort of highlight these hidden figures of history. The ones that we don't recognise, and we wouldn't know who they are. We're not really taught about them. And, especially our local history as well. Our weekly podcast, WINOL, is very, local to Winchester. We like to cover local news, but then also, like, with things like this, we're able to actually look back and cover local history as well, which I think is really, really important to highlight these figures.
What other local women are we celebrating this month?
So there's a few different women local to Winchester. So you've got Lucretia of Winchester, who was a 13th century Jewish businesswoman. Money lending is what she did. She worked with King Henry III. And there's actually, as of 2022, there was a statue of her unveiled outside of the Ark on Jewry Street in Winchester. Yeah, you probably have. And interesting enough, the reason the statue is located there is because it's believed that was probably where the site of the medieval synagogue was, and therefore where most of the Jewish community in Winchester would have lived.
Oh, very interesting.
So sort of back up on my question there. So when do we start celebrating the women in Women's History Month, really?
So Women's History Month first sort of became probably established in 1987, but we also have International Women's Day, which was on Saturday, the 8th of March, and that's actually been a thing for over 100 years, 1911, but it was recognised by the United Nations not until 1977. And it's actually International Women's Day is actually a public holiday in some countries, so up for debate whether we think that should be the case in the UK or not.
Maybe we should campaign for a bank holiday.
try and get a weekend off.
Yeah.
But I think it is a really, it's a great opportunity to celebrate not only these influential women, so whether local or not. There was also a lot of coverage at the museum of Jane Austen, and she's particularly topical this year because it's the 250th anniversary of her death, and she spent her last few days in Winchester. But then also, celebrating these lesser known figures, the more hidden history, particularly hidden female history, I think is really Interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely really important. And, well, speaking of important local women, I had the chance to speak with one of the most recent Dragon's Den contestants, Carla Saul. And she has this business where she sells these hair towels that are made stretched around your head, and they're really soft, they're eco-friendly, sustainable, and they're really good for your hair. Now, she had a £40,000 investment
Wow.
from Sarah Davis, one of the dragons in the den, who, funnily enough, that was her last season as a dragon in the den. But yeah, she got this £40,000 investment just over a week ago, and I had the very nice chance to speak to her.
Oh, wow, that is exciting. How did she end up becoming this businesswoman?
Well, so, funnily enough, she's got quite an interesting story. So, she left school with an O-level, not even an A-level.
So the BTEC sort of.
It's just a very old version of the A-level, I guess, or GCSEs even, because she left when she was 16. So, she didn't have much of an education. She went into a couple of part-time jobs and then had a 10-year career break when she had her children to stay at home and look after them. After that 10 years was up, she thought, do you know what, I'd quite actually like to go and start my career now, only to be met with, you need a degree for this job. So she was a bit stuck. And
was the lack of higher education.
Yeah.
So sort of got put off a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So she then decided to, in her 40s as well, might I add, go back to university.
Wow.
So she went to Peter Symonds College here in Winchester, and she did a foundation degree in business management, and she got a distinction, actually, which is obviously quite the achievement. From there, she went to work for a local startup, again in Winchester, and she was their #1 employee. So she did a great job there. She absolutely flourished, and she learnt a lot of skills that she now uses in her own business called Good Wash Day. So,
do you know sort of how long she'd had this idea for?
Sort of how did it come about, maybe?
Yeah, well, it started in lockdown. So she left this job, and then 2 weeks later, she was really into her hair care and embracing her natural curls and waves. And she was actually straightening her hair for decades. So there's a lot of heat damage there. And she thought, she said to me that she's not going back into an office, so it's the perfect time to experiment with her hair, no matter how crazy it looks. So she started to do that, but she clocked on that using traditional hair towels was actually really bad for your hair. It causes breakage and a lot of
more
split
frizz.
ends. Yeah, definitely. So she found somewhere that using a cotton t-shirt really helps the curls and waves on your hair.
I have heard this actually.
Well, soothe a bit more smoother maybe.
Yeah, it's a lot more softer on your hair essentially, and it's just prevents all that breakage. So she was using her son's cotton t-shirts to wrap around her head.
Be's annoyed.
Why are all my t-shirts damp?
Yeah, it's on her head.
But she found them quite difficult to wrap around her head, and she told me that one evening she was sat on the sofa with her husband James watching telly, and she was just thinking, why can't I find a hair towel that with that material anywhere on the internet or anywhere at all? And then she just decided, well, I mean, I can't sew, but I'm sure I can find someone who can make them. Why don't I just sell them? She's done this business degree, why not? Fast forward to a couple of years later, she received an Instagram DM from a producer, a BBC producer, saying, will you apply for the show? And actually at first she was very reluctant to apply for it, and she didn't really want to go on. However, she decided, why not?
And how did she find the experience?
She found it stressful, but she did enjoy it. The application process itself, she thought was very long and tedious. However, when she went on the show, even though she was filled with all this adrenaline, she thoroughly enjoyed it.
But I suppose you're sort of going on there to maybe sort of fulfill a dream of getting a dragon and sort of kickstarting your company sort of properly and getting people even employees to work with you. Yeah,
definitely. I think the main thing was the investment and the promotion for her. But yeah, I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Mariella, and thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we were the Weekly WINOL podcast, and we look forward to hearing you again next week.
Thank you.
Bye.